how to gain wisdom. In the last session, we were talking about the importance of wisdom to combat the suffering and sorrow that humanity is going through. And we gave the metaphor of a dark room and using the light of wisdom to understand our role, our relationship with things and beings around us. Today's session is about, okay, how do we go about unfolding that light within? How do we go about gaining the wisdom? Because it's not an overnight process. And the challenge we have in this subject is it takes time. Why isn't it that we have classes like this with hundreds of people attending? Because it's not overnight. It is not a mantra that you can repeat. It's not closing your eyes. There's no instant solution. It is work and stamina, day in, day out. But the progress and the change, transformation that we make in our personalities, that is permanent. It takes a while. Why it takes a while is because we're dealing with the subtlest part of our personality. If you think about your physical body, how long does it take to develop? We know the fetus takes 9 months, but then even if you want to get in shape, if you want to lose some weight, if you want to get a little bit stronger, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, it takes consistency. What about emotions? To change our emotions, our reactions, our perspectives, so much longer. Just to understand and connect with a person. We're still refining our relationship with our spouse. So much information, so much data about the person living in such close proximity with us, and yet we haven't got it perfect yet. Intellectually, schools and universities, 12 years for a conventional education, just to get the intellect to some level that we can earn. Look at the amount of time that's required for some development. So physical is there, no doubt, takes time. Emotional, more time. Intellectual, greater time. For spiritual unfoldment, let us be clear. It is not going to happen overnight. There was an enthusiastic American couple, and they met Swamiji when he was still studying, before he started lecturing. They went to the place that he was studying, and they said, Swamiji, what is this Bhagavad Gita? I want to learn the Bhagavad Gita. Can you teach us? And Swamiji's like, sure, of course, with pleasure. This is my duty to teach you. He says, how much time do you have? And they looked at each other and they said, darling, what do you think? He said, we can move around some activities that we had planned in Bombay. Do you think, Swamiji, 2 days is enough for the Bhagavad Gita, 700 verses? What did Swamiji say, Paresh?
I don't know. Maybe he said, sure, I'll give you a summary.
Of course, 2 days is more than enough. No problem. Whole Bhagavad Gita, no problem. You want to learn it? And in that first lecture, Swamiji gave the highest philosophy. Beyond the body, mind, intellect lies your essential being, the self within. Unless you are connected to the self within, you will not be able to handle the challenges, the arrows, the traumas of life. Just as Arjuna, a commander in the army, so well versed, so confident, could not manage his personal issues, collapsed on the battlefield. You have to find the self within. By the end of that 1 hour session that they had, again, they looked at each other. They said, Swamiji, I think we'll need more time to study this Bhagavad Gita. And from 2 days, it became a week. From a week, it became a month, until they had to go. So let's assess. We're not going to change overnight. It's going to take time. And this is important because we do not become result-oriented. We do not become impatient in this path. Even if you find you're moving at a particular speed, a particular momentum, you've developed certain thoughts and grooves and behaviors over 30, 40, 50 years. Now, to change that behavior, even slightly, you cannot change in 90 degrees. As impressive as the knowledge might be, as potent and powerful you might find it and want to change, because of that backlog, of that momentum, that speed that you're traveling at the moment. When I say speed, means the backlog of all your past thinking. It cannot turn, just as your vehicle on the expressway. You can't turn at 90 degrees when you're traveling at 100, 120. So you've got to do it gently. Curves. Our focus should be, are we putting in the right effort to gain wisdom? That's it. Not how wise am I? Sudhakar, can you tell me? Some people ask me for assessments. Sudhakar, am I improving? Do you see a difference in me? Can you see I'm glowing a little bit more? There's a halo around me. What we're interested in is, are we putting in the right effort? Lack of wisdom is suffering and sorrow. Gaining of wisdom is less suffering, more peace. The beauty of it is, all sorrow, all suffering is solvable, is dissolvable. You can dissolve it. We just need spiritual education. Just as how we would educate a child. A child touches a hot plate. It gets burnt. So hot, it's burning, burning, burning. With education, we can prevent this. Do not go near the stove. Handle heat with care. You will get burnt. Don't put your hand in the fire. Why? Because it singes you, burns you. Similarly, with spiritual education, we can save so much of unnecessary stress. Selfishness will isolate you. Selfishness will cause you agitation. This is a law of life. This is one law. Desire unfulfilled causes you agitation. Stronger the desire, unfulfilled, more agitation, more stress. Desires under control, under the management of your intellect, are quieter. Less stress, more peace. These are laws of living. You set a higher ideal, you're enthused to go to work. You're enthused to keep on working. If you're working for yourself, you're waiting for retirement. When will it get over? People try to expedite their retirement. We see in certain countries, Why is there so much of opposition to increasing the retirement age? Because people don't want to work. Not that we're saying that you should not change your work that you're doing. You're most welcome. But if you retire, it's wanting to escape because you don't enjoy what you do. How to change that mindset? Because even if you stop working, you need to do something. How do you enjoy that? We haven't figured that out yet. So we move one problem, move from one area that's causing us agitation to another area without solving it, without addressing it. Now, how do we take in this spiritual education? Fortunately, we've come across a subject that explains it in a structure, that explains it in a language that we can understand. I'm not sure if all of us appreciate what we have. I had the opportunity to experience a lot of different schools of philosophy, of spirituality. I was invited to speak in Rishikesh at the International Yoga Festival. And as one of the speakers there, we had to attend different programs. We had to be on, or at least witness some of the panel discussions. What I realized is, number one, language. Just for such a deep philosophy that comes from ancient wisdom to be accessible to us. And secondly, to speak our language, contemporary, like somebody from the world who understands the world, telling us how we could possibly improve, relate to the world better. So all sorts of strange and weird beliefs, rituals, promises. There was a session about how to gain enlightenment in 30 minutes. It didn't work. But it was a very popular session. And why is everyone going for that? Quick fix, 30 minutes, enlightenment, fantastic. You and I, we're all going class after class, week after week for this enlightenment. Nothing's happening. The only thing that's getting enlightened is you moving out of winter in some parts of the world. So let's start. How do we gain the wisdom? The first requirement for gaining wisdom, anyone, what is it? When do you start learning? What do you need?
Knowledge.
Knowledge, yes, okay. That's the second requirement.
I think a sincere commitment before seeking the knowledge.
A sincere commitment, okay. What precedes that?
Can it also mean you need a paradigm shift?
A paradigm shift, okay. From where to where?
From the external world to be more introverted.
Mm-hmm.
Having an open mind.
Having an open mind, yes.
Cleansed.
Aisel says life experience, yes. Open mind. The first,
I think recognition of our own ignorance is perhaps a good starting point, because you need to recognize and accept that I don't know.
that's it. When do you go to a doctor?
When you're unwell.
When you're unwell. You don't go to a doctor when you're feeling good, when you're healthy. And not just when you're unwell. There's a part that we're missing there. You could be unwell right now. But when will you actually go and see the doctor?
Symptoms.
Leila, you're on mute. Symptoms? Even then, you may not go.
When you can't
Said,
bear
when
the pain
we say-
anymore, the discomfort.
When we feel pain,
When we feel pain. Okay.
When you realize you're unwell.
When you realize you're unwell. When you're aware that there is something wrong. That awareness that there's something wrong triggers the desire, the effort to go and get treatment to get the wellness. But if you think it's okay, if you don't notice it, if you dismiss it, there is no effort, there is no change. There's no rehabilitation. Similarly, for us to want knowledge, we've got to be aware of our ignorance. Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, they all say this. Awareness of one's ignorance. That's the starting point of the philosophy. Because, and here's the simple psychology of it. If you say, I know, are you receptive to any learning?
no.
I know this. I heard this before. I got this. I know. I'm fine. I'm perfect. So what happens is you shut yourself off from any potential growth, transformation. But if you are aware of your ignorance, if your attitude is, I don't know, then there is an opportunity to learn, grow, change, refine, improve. So you all know that the course at the residential course at the Vedanta Academy is 3 years. And Swamiji said, the first year, the whole purpose of the first year is just to learn 3 words. I don't know.
No.
Humble yourself. Josh Billings, he says, the trouble with most folks is not so much their ignorance as their knowing so many things which ain't so. So it's okay to be ignorant. You can correct ignorance if you're aware of it. The problem is when you think you know, which isn't true. You can't help such a person. They know so many things which ain't so. For us, as spiritual seekers, it's important to remain flexible. Peter said, open, humble. Until we achieve self-realization, human perfection, there is room for improvement. Albert Einstein puts it another way. He says, intellectual growth should commence at birth and cease only at death. This should be our attitude. Swamiji says, I may not be the best teacher, but it would be very difficult to beat me as a student. And that has been his attitude, to constantly learn and improve. So, okay, so we've got awareness of our ignorance. We've got awareness of the areas of limitation in our personality. So now we want to learn. So let's acquire the knowledge. That's the second step. How do we acquire the knowledge? And in the chapter, this light of wisdom that we're studying in the Vedanta Treatise, Swamiji reflects on the different schools of religion, of spiritual institutions that he has been associated with. And I'm sure even all of us, if we look at them, the ones that we know, we can generally say there is a mechanical acceptance of ideas, beliefs. And that's why we find there is so much fanaticism in the field of spirituality. And because there is an element of faith in the subject, we take it as an aspect that we must resign our thinking, our critical thinking, our reasoning, our challenging in a way to understand, challenging to clarify, not challenging to have an argument or a confrontation. And probably the mistake that's made in most educational institutions is they mistake acquiring of wisdom with acquiring of knowledge. So there is a great deal of cramming, pushing information. How much information can you take in and then for the exam, regurgitate? Is this effective? If I was to go around the room and ask Vasu, Peter, Debbie, Kavitha, how much do you remember from school? Percentage-wise? Very, very little.
Oh, yeah,
Even
very
if I ask you what subjects you studied in history, you may not remember. University education, how much do you recall? Infinitesimal, so small. But that has been the modus operandum for our education. It has been more about pushing rather than drawing out. Interestingly, the word educate comes from two Latin words, educare. Educare means to draw from or to lead out. Means out. So to draw out or lead from is the idea of education. So ideally, if we are going to draw this wisdom out of a person, it is by taking the knowledge in such a way that we're getting the individual or the student to think for themselves, to take that information that's from outside, look at it from different angles, make it their own. That's when it becomes permanent. When it becomes something that's part of their personality, it's clicked, it's made sense. Or as the Englishman says, the penny has dropped. Look at the great thinkers of the world. William Shakespeare, Herbert Spencer. They didn't go to university. They didn't have a degree. And yet, today, for a degree, we have to study Shakespeare or Herbert Spencer. Interesting. So many business institutes, they study people who never had a degree. They study their cases, they study their lives. They never had degrees. And yet the assumption is by studying their lives in a university course that we'll be able to replicate that. Have you heard of the novel, The Count of Monte Cristo? It's a French novel by Alexandre Dumas. And he says, or he creates a scene where this young sailor, he's imprisoned incorrectly. There's a controversial cover-up and he's implicated and he's imprisoned. And while he's in prison, he realizes that the person sharing the neighboring cell with him is an old abbey. And they are able, through a secret tunnel, they are able to communicate with each other. And this abbey is extremely wise. He has so much of information, different languages, histories, physics, chemistry. And he offers to teach the young sailor, Edmond Dantes. And this is what Edmond Dantes says. He asks him, do you really believe I can acquire all these things in so short a time, all these different subjects? He says, do you really believe I can acquire all this information? Because he says, it'll hardly take 2 years. To which the Abbey replies, not their application, but their principles you may. To learn is not to know. To learn is different from being learned. There are the learners and the learned. Memory makes the one, philosophy is the other. Beautiful. And this is it. Are we okay, connection-wise? Okay. So, how do we convert knowledge into wisdom? Anyone? Yes, Vasu.
You got to reflect on it until it becomes you.
What does reflection mean?
It is like a mirror image of the subject itself. So you become one with it, that the knowledge is part of you, doesn't leave you.
Mm-hmm.
You live it.
Yeah, so if we look at this diagram, so knowledge is when it's external, it's information, it's when you're a learner, okay? Learned wisdom is when you've understood it, not just understood it, you've become it, you've made it your own, it's yours, it's internal now. And the way to get from knowledge to wisdom is reflection. In Sanskrit, it's called manana. It's like banana, but take away the B, put the mind in there, manana. Okay? Easy to remember, manana. Manana is reflection. And it is like what the word suggests. It's hitting the same knowledge from different angles. So you shoot it, let it shoot back. And how do we do this? What's a powerful method for reflecting? It's not repeating, because then you're memorizing. Repetition doesn't work. Quantity doesn't work. What is one way to shoot back?
Does it mean that you understand it from your own perspective? That you get deep into the understanding, that you realize it the way you want it to be. So it becomes your knowledge.
So think about when we were in school, we would actually memorize lines, we would memorize equations, but not the principle. So how do you get to that level of understanding? And deeper the understanding, taking the understanding as deep as we can, we hope it sinks into Vasana level. That's when it becomes you.
You need calmness, no?
You need calmness.
Yeah.
So the calmer you are, the more receptive, the easier it is for that subject to be received. So that is more the conducive environment. It's a supporting factor.
I think it's a cycle, Sudhakar, of acquisition, practice, reflection, and then you continue. I think it is important, as Vasu said, to make it a part of yourself. And I think the most practical means, most accessible means of making it part of yourself is to practice it.
Okay. Practice for sure.
So instead of it being dry book knowledge, when you reflect, which is you think, you stop the acquisition process and just think, and then put it into your action, into your karma. Now it becomes this cycle.
So you test the hypothesis,
Yeah.
test the theorem. Great. Okay, so you're experimenting, and then you think on the data that's reflected upon. I'm saying one useful tool of reflection is, anybody?
Is it maybe that you can see it in happening outside? in the world. You can say, oh, that's it or that's not it. And after time, you can see it and there's examples of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can look for evidence of it. You can try and test it. You can look at it working, that principle in other people's lives. Yes. Great.
Sudhakar, can it also mean that you do it in the very early parts of the morning? You know, when it's most conducive to take in that knowledge.
What is the word you used?
Conducive. Morning.
Okay.
The morning studies, you know. That's
Morning
when you're most absorbent. That
That's
you get something different in that part of the morning to any part of the day.
So, yes, it is. So I was thinking about how do you use that morning? And one tool of reflection is question. So
More research?
Question, not more research. More research would be more information. More. So it's taking the knowledge and questioning the knowledge. Like, for instance, now, it's questioning, not in the session while I'm with you, but later in your reflection period. Sudhakar said there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Is there a difference? People use it interchangeably. Is there a difference between knowledge and wisdom? Can one know but not practice? Can one have information but not be the information? Then you reflect on it. Yes, of course. There are people who do marriage counseling but are divorced. There are people who are dietitians but they're not healthy. Yes, you can have so much information but not practice it. Yes, there's a difference. So like this. So it becomes our own. It doesn't become something that we've heard and we've regurgitated. It's something that we've made ourselves, we've digested. It's something like if you are to add sugar into a glass of water, okay? If you drink it, how will it taste?
Yeah.
Sorry? If you drink it, you've added a spoon of sugar to the water. How will it taste?
Sweet, obviously, but different degrees of sweetness.
Different degrees of sweetness. In fact, depending on what you've done with the water, the sugar will sink to the bottom. You've added it, it'll sink to the bottom. And when you drink it, it may not be that sweet because it hasn't mixed or dissolved into the water. So the idea is the same sugar, for it to become sweet, needs to be stirred, mixed. And that's what we're doing with we've got to interact with the knowledge. We've got to mix it with our personality. So there's an example from the scriptures which talks about how do we convert our unstable mind that is running all over the place, which is very fluid, like milk, into a more stable mind, a more mature mind. And they equate that to yogurt. And they draw the process of taking milk and converting it to yogurt to the reflection process. So what they say is, first, you've got to boil the milk. Okay. And once you've boiled the milk, allow it to cool to a lukewarm temperature. Okay. Any of you who have made yogurt or curd, feel free to chip in, right? Or correct me if I'm missing a step. Okay. So you boil the milk, you allow it to cool to a lukewarm temperature, not hot, not cold. And to this milk now, you add just a little bit of yogurt. Okay. And then you mix it and you leave it overnight. And that's it. And the next morning, hopefully, you have this lovely yogurt. Okay? That's how simple it is. Now, what does it symbolize? We've got to take our experiences from life, as Aisel mentioned. We've got to take our experiences of life, the things that we've gone through, all the information that we've got from life. This is the heat. We've got to take that heat, okay? And then go into an environment that is not so hot, which means you're not in the thick of the world, nor are you in complete isolation in the Himalayas. But in an environment that you can be, as Anar mentioned, relatively peaceful. And in that peaceful time or setting, we add a little bit of yogurt. Not literally. The yogurt represents knowledge. Suddenly, this class starts eating yogurt to become wise. Not yogurt literally. The yogurt represents a little bit of spiritual knowledge. So we take a little bit of knowledge and we mix it. And that's the reflection process. And you've got to leave it overnight. Means you've got to give it time. You've got to give it time to seep in. And this is the problem with a lot of spiritual institutions, is too much information. I have taught in MBA institutions where 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, they have lectures. What can you get from that course? Too much information. My teacher came from a background where he went through a 5-year program. So we covered 10 texts. He went through 30 texts. What do you gain from it? Do you gain the wisdom? So from this example, are there any new points that we haven't covered? Can you think of any angles that we've missed?
I think, Sudhakar, one of the things that has always intrigued and puzzled me is earlier on in this afternoon, we said that you have to accept your ignorance and then be willing to receive and acquire the knowledge. The puzzling thing is that we know each and all of us, people who do know that they're ignorant, but have no desire to do anything about it. They say, yes, I'm ignorant, but I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not quite sure whether we should say something to them or not say anything to them.
So it's as good as, it's called pig's contentment. So it's a form of tamas, means that complacency is there, that whatever this is, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
But it's a form of, I'm fine. I know I'm perfect. What? In my style, in my current condition, I'm okay with this. I don't need your preaching. I don't need your teaching. I don't need your advice. Fine. You're not meant to go and reform any person, every person. So it's a form of complacency. That person is not searching. That's not the awareness of ignorance that we're talking about. It's the awareness of ignorance where you've understood you want knowledge. Similarly, one of the angles of a spiritual person is when you've understood your captivity, when you've understood your bondage. I am bound now by my mind. I get agitated. I am bound by my desires. My mind is in control of me. I don't want to feel like this. So if you're aware of it, you would want to be free. But the problem is, if you're okay in the cage, you won't even if the key is on the lock, you won't open it and go out. So stay in the cage. What's the problem? Person's comfortable there, to each their own. But there is a higher, freer, better life for those who seek it. But the aspect that I wanted to get from the example, I'm not sure, anyone else had some takeaways from the example that we just gave of the milk to yogurt? It was the dose, just a little bit of yogurt. It's regulated doses of the knowledge. So there's no point getting so much of knowledge or reading so many books when we haven't had the opportunity to reflect and absorb it. So even with this subject, I would not recommend more than a lecture a day or more than an hour's study a day of the subject, because it needs reflection time and it needs time to seep into your personality. But if you are reading book after book, page after page, going to class after class or lecture after lecture, it will not have the desired effect. And this is where we must be mature with respect to our capacity. It is going to take time to seep into our personality. So just as similarly, it's like if you have a vitamin deficiency in your body, okay? So you say, okay, I need to get more of these vitamins in. So what do? You take a whole bottle of vitamin C. You have all these vitamin C tablets, okay? What will happen? Doctors?
It will have toxic side effects.
It'll have toxic side effects, right?
And
Or
do more harm than good.
more harm than good, or it'll pass through your body, correct?
Yeah.
It won't be absorbed by the body. So similarly, if we take in too much knowledge that we haven't reflected on or absorbed into wisdom, it becomes like gold on a mule's back. You find out of context, to people who are not interested, you are ready to disperse with everything that you read. We call it verbal diarrhea. It just keeps on coming. Why? Because you haven't digested it here, so it has to come out somewhere. And unfortunately, it's usually on captive audiences, children, all the advice. Regulated doses, little bit of knowledge every day with enough opportunity to reflect, leave it, absorb. This idea. This is a powerful thought, because usually in our enthusiasm, we want more, but it's not more. It's the right dose consistently. So just to drive home this idea, let us look at the difference between knowledge and wisdom, or intelligence and intellect, learner and learned. So have a look at this chart, okay? So intelligence is when it is from external. Intellect is when it's internal, it's from you. Knowledge, intelligence, wisdom, intellect. Information, right? It's just data. Data doesn't change you, data doesn't transform you. When you've reflected on the data, made it your own, it's transformation. Sight versus insight. Today, we live in a world where there is so much of information, so much of data. But have we interpreted it? And we find because of our mobile devices, we're able to consume a lot of information. And I'm not sure if you've noticed, even with respect to newspaper articles, they're becoming shorter and shorter. Journalism is becoming just phrases, headlines with bullet points. There's no beautiful composition. There is no deeper layer. Why? Because we just want information, but we're not thinking about it. We're not questioning it. So if somebody was to ask your opinion about a particular news event, about a particular subject, we'd more or less just be repeating what we've read because we haven't had a chance to absorb, reflect, think. How many books have you read? I'm saying you might even read the Vedanta Treatise. If I was to ask you, Vasu, what have you got from the Vedanta Treatise? Have you reflected on it? Can you say that? Vedanta Treatise, of course, you've been studying it, you've been reflecting it, there'll be so much. But there's so many books that we read. What have we got from it? Even if it's one or two principles absorbed and used for our transformation, that is powerful. Sight and insight, theory and practice. So we say in Vedanta, there's no difference between theory and practice. You only know something when you live it. Otherwise, you don't know it. It's just information. Yeah. So if we move into wisdom, what are some of the signs or indicators of spiritual wisdom? How would you measure it? So if you're absorbing this knowledge, what would you see?
Calmness,
Again, I see
equipoise.
calmness, composure.
Calmness, poise. Yeah, great.
And the whole chain of thinking, feeling, speaking, and acting is very measured.
Yeah. More intellectual, for sure.
Very deliberate.
Do you find spiritual people indulging in sensuality?
Not indulging, but they are aware of the value of moderation.
So they enjoy it, but they won't indulge in it.
Yeah.
So they would enjoy a fine meal, a drink, a person's company. No, they would enjoy it, but there is no indulgence because they've understood that quality, that quantity of pleasure. And because they are seeking happiness from higher things, they've understood the limitation of the lower, they've understood what the higher offers. So as we unfold ourselves, we will start looking for pleasures from subtler parts of our personality. If you were to offer a chocolate to a parent, the parent, depending on where they are, but usually the parent would keep the chocolate, and instead of enjoying the chocolate themselves, now again, I can't speak for all parents, they would pass on the chocolate to their child. So they get more pleasure from the child enjoying the chocolate than them actually consuming it. So it is not, we would say, oh, what a sacrifice. The parents sacrifice their personal enjoyment for the child. Is it a sacrifice?
No.
It's not a sacrifice. And nobody understands that this is a reflection of wisdom. you are getting more pleasure from the child's enjoyment than your sensual enjoyment. Therefore, you're doing it for the child. This is the beauty. And this is the beauty of the spiritual path. It is not about suffering. It's not about pain. It's not about giving up. It's about understanding there's greater pleasure, higher, deeper in your personality. So you're not experiencing this pain of renunciation. The only pain that you experience is we only know that particular level at the moment. So that little bit of transition when we are gaining higher knowledge, when we are trying it out, we're reluctant to leave the little bit of pleasure that we are enjoying. As transient or as fleeting as it is, we don't want to give it up. And that's the displeasure, the discomfort, just to have faith to say, let me try something more, something higher. But as we get more knowledge of the higher, we get interested in that and we leave the lower. So as we continue with spiritual wisdom, we start looking for pleasures in deeper and higher parts of our personality. Why? Because there is greater pleasure there. So from the intellect, we find that there's more pleasure than from the mind or from the body. And when we start getting closer to the spirit, to the self, we find there's greater pleasure there than from the intellect, mind, and body, from the senses. When you start enjoying the bliss of the higher, you are free from the demands of the lower. So two things happen when you gain the spiritual wisdom. Lower pleasures don't pull you as much as before. Higher pleasures you start enjoying. So there's a greater peace, greater enjoyment in your personality, in your life. And ultimately, when we achieve enlightenment, there's no comparison. It's like sunlight versus all other lights. Now it's a little bit brighter, it's a little bit nicer, a little bit more peace. But when you get to self-realization, it's not a question of 100 watt, 200 watt, 1000 watt sunlight, incomparable. So the idea is, with spiritual wisdom, if we're doing it correctly, keep rising, keep rising, keep rising. If we are not rising, then we go through the bumps, the ups and downs of life. What are the ups and downs of life? Anyone? What's
Agitations.
Agitations. What causes these ups and downs?
The mind is weak. It's
weak. Mm-hmm. See, in a life, there is no challenge-free life. There are going to be things that we like, things that we don't like, things that go our way, things that don't go our way. So an up would be you do well in your career. A down will be the recession, difficult times. Up, you're healthy. Down, COVID. And these are the ups and downs. When you gain spiritual wisdom, you start rising. So if you're at road level, every dip you feel. So you'll feel the speed bump, you'll feel the pothole, and it shakes you up. These are the knocks and shocks of life. They hit you, they batter you. You feel agitated, you feel affected, you feel frustrated. But rise. And as you rise, you don't feel the speed bump, the pothole, because you're above that. But the hill and the valleys, you feel that. Now, what are the hills and the valleys? These are more serious things, more serious challenges. So those things will hit you. So it's not as frequent or as often as you were getting agitated earlier. You get agitated less. It would take something quite great, something quite high or low to affect your mental peace and balance. What should you do? Keep rising. Keep rising. Keep rising until you reach a level where everything looks flat. Nothing interrupts your peace and bliss. You've prepared for every aspect of life. You're attuned to the self within at the highest. Nothing in the world, no change, no fluctuation, no challenge can upset that. Or if at all, it would be something quite extraordinary. Something really high, and maybe a Mount Everest, to upset that peace. This is the effect of wisdom. This is what we're looking for. So think of the gaining of wisdom as the rising in a hot air balloon. The higher you go, the fewer fluctuations, disturbances. And the last part, which I think someone mentioned earlier, is ideal time for when you're at peace, when you are receptive to receiving that knowledge and reflecting on it. The best time for reflection, contemplation, and ultimately meditation is the early morning, 4 to 6 a.m. Be patient. This subject is a skill, it's a technique, it's going to take time, but if you're consistent, it becomes enchanting. It becomes the highlight of your day. I'm not sure how many of you have reached that yet, but I was talking to someone this week and they were like, I can't wait. This is like, I'm excited to wake up in the morning and do my e-learning lecture. To which I said, but are you doing one lecture? She said, no, I'm tempted. I'm tempted sometimes to come back home and do another. I said, no, easy. One lecture. So let's recap. How do we gain wisdom? Here are the points from the session today. The first one, well, you can see it on the screen, where we said, be aware of one's ignorance. The second one is acquire in doses. The third one, reflect till it becomes wisdom. And the last one, use the early mornings and be patient. How we started the session, it's going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight. But if we are doing 1, 2, 3, 4, it's a question of time. It'll happen. And how will we see it happening? Less agitation, more peace, a higher quality of life, bliss. This is the path of wisdom. This is the way to gain wisdom. With that peace of mind, you're more receptive to more knowledge. Gain the knowledge in doses. Reflect on it in the early hours of the morning until it becomes yours. So for those of you who are looking for some momentum, because it's not easy, we haven't done this, we haven't invested time in gaining wisdom. And whilst there really isn't an excuse, because there's not time that's an issue, it's a question of priority. And we haven't prioritized it because we haven't yet fully understood the value. But for those of you who would like some help, what I would recommend, and even for those of you who are on the path, is consider coming to the academy in India, or if we're doing something nearby, come for that. So for instance, in Europe, we're doing the Prague retreat in May. In Africa, I think we're doing something in November. see how you can connect with the community and get an experience of early nights, early mornings, taking in the knowledge, reflecting on it, and then discussing it during the day, giving time, not too much of information, not too much of knowledge. And what I would recommend as either a booster or as a way of getting some momentum to experience this kind of early morning, early night routine, consider coming for, we have an event. It happens twice a year. It's where students like yourselves from around the world come for 6 days. It's called the Vedanta Academy Experience. And the next one is from the 2nd to the 7th of July. It's a Sunday to Friday. And the following one is in January. So it'll be twice a year. You can come for both, you can come for one, and you can plan your year accordingly as your booster shot to get this experience. And I thought we'll finish by showing a short video on what academy life is like, and then you take it forward from there. So here is
Nestled in the serene hills of Malavali, India, 108 kilometers from Mumbai, lies a campus which draws seekers of self-development. Founded in 1988 by world-renowned philosopher Swami A. Parthasarathy, the Vedanta Academy is created to develop the whole personality of young individuals through a 3-year residential course. The course curriculum is based on Swami A. Parthasarathy's 65 years of scientific research and writing on Vedanta, India's timeless philosophy on life and living. The program enables you to strengthen your intellect and gain clarity of thinking. With reflection and focused discussions, you find answers to all of life's questions. The intellectual development is accompanied with devotional practices to elevate your mind's emotions. The campus provides you with facilities to discipline your body through yoga, various sporting activities, jogging, and gym. There are also opportunities to engage in service for a higher cause in various areas of your interests. A carefully designed daily schedule nurtures spiritual growth and is supported by the company of like-minded seekers from diverse backgrounds. You can also experience the Vedanta Academy through short visits, corporate leadership programs, customized retreats such as the Vedanta International Retreat for adults and the Next Gen Wisdom Summit for youth. Learn techniques to improve yourself and your relationship with the present-day world, and gain a taste of simple living and higher thinking. The Vedanta Academy is a place to find the ultimate purpose of life and uplift your personality to command success and peace.
So it all boils down to reflection, to convert the knowledge to wisdom. And we close with this quote by Lord Buddha. And it's in the text. And it's about how do we make it our own? He says, do not believe what you have heard. Do not believe in tradition because it is handed down many generations. You know, often we say Vedanta is old, it's a tried and tested wisdom. No. Don't believe it because of that. Do not believe in anything that has been spoken of many times. Many of your friends are talking about it. Do not believe because the written statements come from some old sage, 96-year-old Swami Parthasarathy. Do not believe it for that. Do not believe in conjecture, mysticism. Do not believe in authority or teachers or elders, because it's just knowledge. information. But after careful observation and analysis, so again, tools of reflection, observation, analysis, when it agrees with the reason, which we covered, and it will benefit one and all, then accept it and live by it. God willing. We meet next week. Hari Om. See you all next week.
Gotta go. Thank you.
Hari Om Sudhakar, thank